project is Butterick 6600. We're going to do the jacket, and you need a separating zipper. A separating zipper means it comes apart at the bottom so you can completely take it apart. You do not want a closed-ended zipper because you'll have to pull it over your head. And this is a jacket, not a pullover. So you need that. And then I'm doing mine in 2 fabrics. You could do this all in one, but I'm going to do this really nice Glen plaid. This is a knit. I covered my mag. This is going to be the body of the jacket, and then the Ponte knit from last 2 weeks. I made another cute outfit, and it had plain black Ponte, and I'm using the remnants of that for the sleeves. So that's this week's project. I'm going to show you the alterations in just a minute, but if you want to make this pretty shirt that I'm wearing, I'll put the link up above. It'll be in the corner, and you can go and sew this shirt. This is 7-berry fabric. It's the bamboo leaves. It looks very oriental. It's lovely. I actually have sewn with quite a few pieces of this. I have some napkins out of this fabric too. I just love the fabric weight, but the pattern's pretty cute too. So if you want to sew it, click the link up above. All right, let me show you the alterations I made to the pattern and we'll get sewing. As usual for me, the pattern fits great, except I need a little extra in the back along the hip. So this is how I did it. It's cut on the fold and the center back is the grain line. So I was going to slash and spread, but you really can just add to the center back. It works the same way, and then just move your grain line information over. So it doesn't change at the neckline, slowly comes out. We'll see this long wedge, so that I end up adding almost 3 inches in the back hip only. And that's just going to give me what I need to get the hip comfortable. I may end up taking it a little in the waist. You can see I actually cut it smaller. So I cut the larger size down here and still needed to add for the hip. But in the bust line and neckline and everything else, I went down a size. So this is the alterations that I've made for me for this pattern. All of them on the side are the same. So the front and the back are not the larger size. I've gone down a size in the shoulder and bust line and then graded out to the hip. And then in the center back, I've added this. Everything else, the neckline and stuff, I've cut on the extra large. And the front facing, this does have a raglan sleeve, and the raglan sleeve has a seam down the center. So it's almost like a men's jacket sleeve, and sort of. Men's jacket sleeve, it has a separate piece under the arm and a different piece on the top. This one has a seam down the center of the arm, just something different, which is what made me decide to do the body in the plaid and the sleeve in the black, because then I don't have to worry about matching my plaid on the top of the sleeve. I just didn't really like that idea. It's easier to match it in the center front. And I'm going to put elastic in my sleeve hem down here just to give it a little, make it fit my wrist better, and I can push up the sleeve if I want to. Laying out my front and my back on the plaid, and I made sure that my plaid lined up on both sides so that when I go to match on the side seam, everything lines up. You don't want your plaid going one direction on the left and a different direction on the right. So I folded it on this little double line here to help keep everything straight, and I've got my back lined up on the front. I've laid this on top, and I've made the little markings so I can line my plaid up for the front so that everything will line up at the side seam too. And then I'll have the plaid match in the front at the zipper. In hopes, if you want to know about how to match plaid, I have a video on it, and I'll put a little link up in the iCard for you right now. Nothing's pinned down yet, but I've been playing puzzle pieces here, trying to get everything fit, because I wanted it to go ahead and do my facing out of the Ponte. It's a little lighter weight, and I just think it will lay nicely. I need both sleeve pieces on grain, and I need one collar piece, and I can cut it on the fold if I want to. So after a little playing around, I think I've got everything on, and I can cut out the rest of my pattern. So this pattern is one that you could serge almost entirely together if you have an overlock machine. If you don't, then the way they show it, and the way the most commonly is shown in a commercial pattern, is they have you straight stitch twice. So you straight stitch and you straight stitch next to it. That's sort of the way, that's sort of an offset straight stitch instead of a tiny zigzag. I don't know why actually they do that. If it's a moderate stretch, it doesn't need a lot of stretch in the stitch because it's not a super stretchy fabric. But if you choose to use a little bit stretchier fabric and you want it to be stretchy, you need the stitch to have some give, or you'll get popped stitches along your seam. So a tiny zigzag is your option. And what I mean by tiny is it's narrow and a little bit far apart. You don't want a satin stitch, and that way you'll have some give in the seam, but from the outside it'll still kind of look like a straight stitch. You don't want a wide zigzag because you will get a wave in the seam and it will look from the outside not as nice. So if you have an overlock, we're going to use it a lot. If you don't, go to your tiny zigzag. You can do as the pattern shows, which is your straight stitch twice, double straight stitch. Not my favorite, but possible. If you twin needle, I never recommend sewing the seams with a twin needle. I know I have seen people do it because twin needling does give you some give, because between the top stitch, which is straight stitched side by side, the back is a zigzag, so it will stretch. I don't ever recommend putting a garment together that way, though it may work, and if you've done it, I'd be curious to know. Leave me a comment, tell me if you've actually stitched a garment together with the twin needle. I'm curious. All that said, we're going to start with step one, which is stay stitching. They say take your sleeve, and this is very true if you have a soft knit, because they will stretch out. So right here in this curvy part, they have a stay stitching to keep that curve from stretching out. If you are a person who cuts out one day, sews a little the next day, sews a little the next day, like if you're slowly sewing this out throughout a week instead of like I do where I cut it out and sew it all in one day, it's good to do the stay stitching, because what happens is most people who do this, they cut out one day, they fold everything up and put it away so their dining room table's clean, and then they'll get it out in the weekend and they'll sew a little bit and put it away, and all that moving of your pattern pieces will start to cause stretch and fray and movement in that cut edge, and you don't want that. So that's what stay stitching prevents. My fabric's very stable. I'm not going to worry about stay stitching, but you may need to, so I'm not telling you to skip that step. You need to evaluate for your project. So after step one, which is stay stitching in the arm side, so they're pinning the sleeves because this is raglan sleeves. So they're going to pin the sleeve together, and you're doing your armhole first, front and back. So you're going to have a front with the front sleeve and a back with the back sleeve, and we're going to just serge those together. So I'm going to do that really quickly. You can top stitch if you want to, but I'm not going to. If you want to fold that back up and top stitch it or twin needle it, which would look really nice, that's certainly an option. It gives a little more of a high-end detail. It's up to you. I don't always like top stitching on my projects, and I'm definitely not going to be doing it on this one. I'm going to pin those sleeves together and stitch them in. I'll show you what that looks like. Stay stitching, and here we're pinning the front sleeves on, stay stitching, pinning the back sleeves on. We're pinning together. Here's sleeve, here's the front of the jacket, and we're pinning together a convex curve and a concave curve. So right in this area, the cut edges are not going to want to match up real well, but it matches up perfectly on the stitching line. So you may have to stretch just a tiny bit on this cut edge to get it to lay up. Can I just show you? I'm going to turn it so you can kind of see. It looks like there's a buckle, but there really isn't. When I go to stitch it, that will completely disappear because it lines up perfectly at the 5/8. The cut edge is going to be a little short on the sleeve side and a little long on the jacket side, and that's just because we're marrying together two different kinds of curves, which will give us this lovely look for our sleeve. Isn't that going to be cute? All right, so when you're putting in the sleeve, this is the back. On all of the sleeves, you're going to have to stretch a tiny bit for this curvy spot on the sleeve side. And I recommend you don't want to stretch it all in the bottom part of your arm side here. This should fit exactly. There should be no change from sleeve to arm side, or from the sleeve to the bodice. But when you get up here into this curve part, this is where the convex concave comes in. This is where you want to stretch in this section, and then up here's the neck. You don't want to have too much stretch right up here close to the neck. That is stretching of the sleeve. So just pay attention when you're putting this in. You may have to do a little stretching on the sleeve only to get these to fit together, because the cut edge is narrower, and can you see the fullness here? But when I go to the sewing machine and I stretch just slightly on the sleeve, that goes away, and the sleeve looks like this. See how pretty that is, and nice and smooth. I haven't pressed or anything. Look how nice that looks. All right, we are finished sewing our sleeves front and back on at the arm side. So now we're ready to sew our fronts to our backs. Here it is all pinned together. Oops, I forgot under this arm. This one's all pinned together, so I can just sit down and serge. And you can see I've lined up my plaid on the inside. Whoop, there we go. So the plaids will go across the side seam appropriately. So I'm almost ready to go serge this together. I apologize, I did not realize that my microphone had died. So here I am just showing you the sleeves together and the front and back together. And now I'm going to finish off the hem of the sleeve, turn it up and put in an elastic in it. So that's what I'm trying to tell you in this little section of the video. Doing my sleeve, I've serged the edge and folded up the amount that it says for the hem. You can fold up a little more, a little less, without much change, but if you fold up too far, like if you need to alter it quite a bit, it won't fit. I'm folding up high enough so that I can get this elastic in there. I'm on a little bit of a wider elastic, so it's just going to fit. My pin is where I'm going to start sewing. This pin back here is where I'm going to stop sewing, so I have a little hole to feed my elastic through. So that's what I'm going to do now. So you can see the difference between the two sleeves. Here is how it would look if you just hem it. Here's how it looks if you put the elastic in. If you choose to do the elastic, leave your opening in the underarm of the seam and not on the top seam. There's two seams. One is over the shoulder and one is in the underarm. So leave the hole for feeding elastic through in the underarm. Or start and stop if you're just hemming under there too. We are now ready to start working on the collar. They stay stitched everything, which you certainly can do, especially if you're moving this around a lot. You're going to be stretching out those curvy parts with all the bias, like the neckline. So transfer those markings from your collar, and on the neckline of all of these pattern pieces we'll have markings to get everything lined up nicely. It's going to look like this, pinned on. So here's mine pinned on. So it's not folded, it's open, and you're just pinning it along the neckline. You can see right there's one of my little notches that I've matched up. After you've done that, on the other side, I think it's a little confusing. So they take their facing and then they show this. Well, let me show you how that's gonna look. So here's my collar. It's pinned to the neckline. And then on the other side of the collar, right sides together, we're going to pin the facing on. So what you're seeing right here is where they fold it back, the little edge of the facing, and you're going to have one on each side of the collar. And then the facing straight edge lines up with that front of that collar piece. So this all gets folded in half, and that facing will come down and it will line up with the center front of the jacket, of the shirt. So it all matches up. So I'm going to go ahead and pin all of these on, and I am not serging these. I am going to just straight I always have a hard time saying that. Straight stitch this at the sewing machine. All of this collar neckline business. A quick example of how things don't always match up on the cut edge. See how this hangs off, but they match up perfectly at the stitching line. So you want to really be paying attention to your stitching line over the cut edge. They should be the same depth, but the angles may not match perfectly, which is normal, especially on things like necklines and sleeves. Also, this does not call for any interfacing. If you feel like your fabric really needs it, make sure you buy a knit interfacing and don't use a woven. Voiceover Stacy is back, and this is how your pieces will look when you get the collar and the facings all sewn to each other. You'll then fold the collar piece in half, right sides together, and the facing should line up. Your little seam lines will all match up all the way down, and that's where you're going to slide the zipper in. So that's what's coming next, is the zipper. Now, the pattern tells you to buy a certain size zipper, and then it gives directions on how to shorten the zipper if you need to, because it just recommends one size. Coming up, I'm going to have lots of problems with this zipper shortening issue. It depends on the zipper that you buy. There's a lot of variables in here, but you can go on Etsy and special order your separating zippers, your whatever zipper you want, to a specific length, which is wonderful and will save you a lot of heartache. So do that. Okay, on to installing the zipper. Now I just talked to you about how you can order a custom length and zipper, but mine is not. And I am having to do the thing it shows. So what I've done is I've removed the tooth where I want my zipper to end. And here is my zipper stop. I've pulled out some pliers here to help get that off. So I'm going to replace the tooth that I just removed. Here's the little zipper tooth with the zipper stop right there. But before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and remove a couple more teeth above it so that I'll have a nice plain piece of tape, and then I'll cut off the rest. I'm not going to try and remove all of these because I don't need to. I just need about 5/8 of an inch of tape above it with my proper tooth. I'm doing this one side first. I'm going to zip up to make sure I have the teeth lined up properly before I do the other side. Not fun, time consuming, but it is possible to do. Be very careful because you can damage your teeth and your tape, and then you just have to start over with another zipper. Okay, so I have removed the teeth I need. I was putting my zipper stop on, which it was not going back on. I'm just going to show you as close as I can. There is a, if you look at this tape, can you see how thick? It's got like a thick round edge, and the stop came off fine, but I could not get it to go back on. It just would not. It refused. I tried thinning out the tape so I could slide it down. It would not, and then it went flying, and I have pulled out all of the furniture. I have swept. I cannot find my zipper end. So this little zipper trick to shorten your zipper at the top has taken more time than it has for me to put the entire jacket together, and it's still not fixed. So I'm either going to have to go buy another zipper, which I'm super frustrated about because I like the zipper I bought. I special ordered this big chunky zipper. Or I'm going to do this first. I'm folding back, and I'm going to stitch up to that, because what happens is this is going to fold back on itself, and it may make enough of a stop that I won't lose my head, the top of my zipper off. If this were a lighter weight zipper, I would just leave the whole zipper in there and put it back, but this is too thick and chunky. You can't stitch through it like you can some zippers, so you really do need to remove the extra teeth. I'm going to give it a try. If it doesn't work, I'm chunking this zipper, and I'll go buy another one. So I'll get back with you in a minute. I always start with the zipper slightly open so that the zipper head's not in the way. You can see how big and chunky this zipper head is. And then once I get it far enough that I can zip the zipper head up and out of the way, I sink my needle, and then I will pull that zipper head up. I can't do it one-handed, but I'll slide that zipper head up out of the way, and then I'll continue stitching down. Okay, I've slipped it out of the way. I'll continue stitching. I think this little trick at the top is going to work. It's not as great as having its own stopper, but I think it's going to be okay. So here's zipper side one. You can see the top. I still have a pin up there holding it, but the zipper did not slide off the top, so I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing on this side. I'm hoping I don't have to rip the zipper out. I would recommend buying, I bought the exact size that the pattern said. I would go a couple inches shorter. Look at how much I have hanging off the top, and that's for a large size. I'm doing an extra large length here, so you don't need nearly the amount of zipper it says. I have a zipper. This is going to work, it looks like, for me, thankfully. I'm not going to zip the zipper head off the top, which is the big concern. And now when you're done with the zipper, you want to double check before you move on that the collar lines up appropriately. If you're like I am and you have plaid, that the plaids all line up and you don't have any issues there. If that's the case, we're ready to unzip this thing, and we're going to fold down. The facing gets folded down in half. So here's our collar right at the corner. It's folded down. We've got our facing and our neckline lined up right on top of each other. We're going to start pinning our way down, matching that up along the center front, and we're going to stitch it in again. And you can stitch right on top of your old stitching or right next to it. The main thing is you don't want your zipper head to get caught on that facing when it's flipped around. And we will come back and work on the little neckline part last. I'm going to show you on the directions here. So we've done all of this nonsense. Not really, but it's frustrating. And we're folded down, and they actually show stitching in the ditch kind of along this neckline. I would get this front done first. You're going to come across your hem and stitch this way so that you have a nice little corner on your hem before you fold up to do your hem. And then we'll come back and, pardon me, my hand's making that not focus. There we go. And then we'll come back and worry about this little section afterwards. I would personally not do it quite the way they're doing it. I probably would flip it around, but we're gonna worry about this little section after all of this is done. So here's the zipper. Here's the facing, the zipper sandwiched in, and I forgot to mention it, but do go in and seam finish the edge of that facing. It's just gonna make for a nicer finish. So you can see up here where I folded back that little piece that it shows, and then I just serged across that whole thing. One side, the zipper head will be on one side and it won't be on the other, so the side without the zipper head is the easiest one to sew. When you go to do the zipper head side, you'll sew for a little ways. You'll have to sink your needle, move the zipper head out of the way because it's just too big and bulky. Okay, we're ready to now work on the collar, and the directions don't really say to do this, but I find that it works a lot better. I went ahead and clipped in the neckline on the facing side, and on the jacket side, just in that front curvy part, the back's a little straighter and doesn't tend to give as much of an issue. But when I was pulling this over to get it ready to pin, it was wanting to twist a little. And by giving it that clip, it doesn't bind up and it's not going to want to twist nearly as much. So I'm going to go ahead and pin this. You want to pin all of these seams up towards the collar. You may need to do some grading. Grading is where you trim one a little lower than the other. So you have a 5/8 inch one, a 1/2 inch, a 3/4, or I mean a 3/8, something like that, or a 1/4 of an inch, just so that you have a gradation of those edges and it makes it smoother in there and you don't have a big thick lump. It depends on your fabric if you even need to do that, because you're going to end up with 4 layers of fabric in places like this, and you could end up with it kind of shadowing through. It's not on mine at all. Anyway, I'm going to pin it all in so you can see what it looks like in that inside neckline. So if you want to do a little whip stitching from the inside, this is how it will be pinned from the inside, and then you can come in and whip stitch this down, and you can stitch this down to this upper seam right here in the sleeve, and under here even you can open this up and stitch seam to seam inside to get all of that to hold down so that your facing stays where it belongs and doesn't move or flip out. And you can even tack it to this seam right here, just one more way to keep that facing down. However, you can also, you can flip it to the right side, stitch in the ditch from the right side, and when you do that, I'm going to pull this tight so you can see you're actually going to top stitch right in this seam along here. The only thing is you want to make sure that the facing hangs down just past where you're going to stitch, and you would pin on the right side, of course, instead of the wrong side. And then it would be a very gentle top stitch that you could hardly see, but it would be kind of right in that ditch. So you could do either one. I think I'm going to hand whip stitch mine down just because I've done, the only top stitching I have is on my hem, and I don't really want it. I don't think I want anything anywhere else. I am see this sort of little buckly thing. It's just sort of doing that even after I've clipped and trimmed, and there's no interfacing in there. That may be partly why. I don't know. It doesn't look bad, and I think once it's pressed and everything, it'll be fine. Died. I apologize. The sound may be a little wonky. I just didn't realize I had dead mics. So here it is. I really like it. It was very easy to sew other than the zipper issue. The zipper issue was not sewing in the zipper, it was just the length. So pre-measure, subtract your 5/8 inch. The hardest part was that the zipper was the wrong length and trying to adjust it, and anyway, it can be done. Was difficult in this type of zipper. So I think life would be easier to special order the right length zipper. I really like it. It does not have a pocket, but I could see putting in a welt pocket, though this is so soft, it may not hold up to it. A side pocket would be less comfortable because of the length. It could be done, but maybe not, just may not be as easy to get to. Definitely think this will be in the make again. And this pattern has a lot more in it. This pattern has a top and a pair of pants and a jumpsuit. So it's sort of like a capsule wardrobe a little bit. It has a lot of things in there. So I definitely will try it again because it's not very difficult. Good, fast, easy sewing projects that are pretty cute and sporty. I would love to know, did you sew it? What did you sew it out of? How did it go for you? Tell me about your zipper. Did you get a zipper that was easy to adjust in length? Not like mine, though I like the zipper a lot. It's a nice, chunky, cute zipper. See you next week for another fun video.